Greetings to all the viewers at Hansraj e-Samvaad Center, a center for digital content creation, established under the aegis of the Mahatma Hansraj Faculty Development Center, under the Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching Scheme of the Ministry of Education, Government of India. At Hansraj e-Samvaad, we deliver well-researched and specialized teaching content for students and research scholars. It is a unique initiative by Hansraj College to make knowledge accessible to all. I am Ismat Chughtai, Assistant Professor at the Department of English at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. I welcome you to another lecture on the GE, Individual and Society. I have already created a playlist of over a dozen lectures and I will attach the link below for your reference. Today we will discuss a short story on the theme of class under the unit Caste and Class from the book Individual and Society. The name of the story is Kallu, written by the much acclaimed and celebrated short story writer Ismat Chughtai. Let me describe the lecture plan in this two-part lecture. This will be a two-part lecture. I will cover first half of the story in this lecture, and in the other lecture I'll cover the other half of the story. So I'll in total upload two parts. There will be two lectures for the story by Ismat Chughtai. Let me now go on to the introduction to the story, and the title of the story is Kallu. So this story is about, basically in short, if I say, it's about the hypocrisy that is present in our society. This is a story which explains the world, and it explains that the world gives a lot of emphasis on economic standing of a person, on good looks, on what the society deems as good looking. This is also a story about how certain people change in the face of certain advantages and certain benefits when given to them. Right? This is what majorly the story is about. It's obviously a very multi-layered story. It's a story which raises several issues, and it looks deceptively simple. The story appears very simple with its simple language, with its light-hearted tone and its humorous narrative style. But like all literature written by Ismat Chughtai, this short story Kallu also has much deeper meanings than what appears on the surface. On the surface, it might appear as if it's a very, very light-hearted and it's a comedy. It might appear so, but the reality is it's not a comedy at all. It's a very significant and a very hard-hitting, what you can say, narrative on not just the hypocrisies that people usually that people have within themselves, but also shows how people are egoistic, how people are hypocrites, and how their attitudes are dictated by economic benefit, and how for money people change very quickly. In short, this story Kallu is a story about a household servant, a young boy roughly aged around 7 to 8 years old. His name is Kallu, which is the short form of the name Kalimuddin. He's a domestic servant in a Muslim family where he works day and night and has all sorts of works at his disposal, and he runs errands day and night. Then one day, due to a minor and an innocent and a playful family altercation, this young boy Kallu was beaten by the family members of the house where he worked and was kicked away from work. Then few decades later, in between this the partition of India happens. Then few decades later, this young boy comes back as the district magistrate, as the district collector of that area, and he gets married in the same family with the girl that he liked in his childhood, and the story ends happily ever after with their marriage. But as I mentioned, the story might be deceptively simple, but it carries a whole lot of meanings and interpretations. Okay, so with this I will now start with the story, and I will start reading the story from the very beginning, and will give my views and comments wherever I feel are important, as is usually the way that I have been taking lectures in the previous sessions. So look at the opening lines of the story. They are very interesting. It says, although not quite 7, Kallu did the work of a grown man. The first thing that he did in the morning was to get the stove going. Then he put water on for tea, set the table for breakfast, and made 100 rounds to the door and back, carrying butter, bread, then milk, and finally the eggs. Flapping his slippers noisily, he travelled to the kitchen innumerable times, and after the cook had prepared breakfast, Kallu made more trips to the table, bringing hot toast and parathas to ensure their good health. The children, nearly all of whom were Kallu's age, were forcibly fed porridge, milk, eggs, toast, and jam while Kallu quietly looked on. When breakfast was over, he sat alone in the kitchen and ate leftover burnt ends of toast and paratha, hurriedly downing them with some tea. In short, he spun around like a top until everyone had left for either the office or the school. Later, he washed the dirty diapers and then settled down to play, and in between, he made trips to the front door to receive mail from the mailman or to inquire the name of the visitor at the door. So you notice how Ismat Chughtai begins the story. She begins the story with the description of Kallu and the description of whatever he does in the day. We can also very easily make out that he is a poor boy working as a domestic servant, and despite this, their owner's family doing fairly well, they do not treat this young kid Kallu with any amount of decency. They don't feed him properly, nor do they treat him as a human. They treat him inhumanly, like an animal. This shows the huge difference in the class to which Kallu belongs and the class to which his employers or his owners belong to. The readers will easily get the impression that Kallu is, discriminated, while the other children of Kallu's age are fed with milk, toast, and so on and so forth. Kallu was given just a few leftovers to eat. As the story goes forward, we also get to know that his mother used to live in the village and she was a domestic servant there, and she used to work in the village, and she left Kallu in the home thinking that he will get enough amount of food at least to eat, and because she worked as a cook for the zamindar, she thought that he will get enough food to eat, but here in the rich Muslim household, but the reality is that he is discriminated in the house. So one can only imagine how difficult it must be for a child of 7 years of age, performing all the duties, daily hardships, running day and night around the home from morning to evening, and that too without being fed or even reimbursed properly, right? Apart from the household work, we also get to know that Kallu also has to serve each and every member of the family. Okay, so look at the description of his condition of the boy, and let us see how he gets called every minute to serve the members of the household. Chughtai writes, "Dear boy, come home and scratch my back. Son, bring me some water. Get some roti from the kitchen, son, and ask the cook for a little dal as well. Rub down my back, boy. Rub my shoulders. Massage my head." The truth was, his little hands executed a great foot massage, and once he started, you didn't want him to stop. Right? Then he says, often he would have to continue massaging the entire afternoon. Sometimes he dozed off and fell on your legs. A kick was generally enough to awaken him. So in these lines that we just now read, we notice how in a very brisk manner the author, Chughtai, shows the excruciating amount of work that Kallu has to do. But did you notice that despite the tragic condition of the 7-year-old boy who is working day and night, and despite this tragic feel in the entire story, despite the 7-year-old servant running day and night, the tragic feel does not reach the audience, the readers. This is the writing style, the narrative style of the writer, Chughtai, because she invites the readers to understand it without having to explicitly say it herself. This is because the author, Chughtai, wants the readers to understand the pathetic condition of Kallu with their own critical thinking capacities, right? Overly, the story doesn't feel tragic, but it is a tragic story, right? She doesn't say it directly. Chughtai doesn't say anything directly. Her writing style is never straightforward and never too easy to judge. You will notice that her writing style is very different from, say, the way Premchand writes. Because Premchand writes by introducing, what you can say, pathos in the narrative. As I mentioned in the very beginning of the lecture, this story carries a lot of meanings, but it appears deceptively simple on the surface. And this is the strength of the narrative power and the narrative technique of the author Ismat Chughtai. Overtly, she does not write in a serious manner, but the subject matter of her writing is very serious. The author infuses humor, irony, sarcasm in such a manner that it can be visible only to the most ardent of readers. The narrative tone of the story is never tragic. You don't come across, you don't feel, that it's a tragedy, because the author does not make it sound tragic. This is very different from the way, say, Manto or, as I mentioned, Premchand writes. These authors, they write with a sense of pathos, which makes the story dark, brooding, and you can say tragic. But the author Chughtai does not write in this manner, even though when the subject matter is serious. Okay, so these are just different ways of writing, these are different techniques employed by different writers, and they each have their own unique way of writing. It's better we don't compare them together, but rather we should get a hang of the different writing styles. In fact, when I'll be discussing Premchand and Valmiki, I'll be discussing them very soon in the subsequent lectures. We will understand the different ways in which the two writers, Premchand and Valmiki, write Dalit literature. I will come to that subsequent lectures, but let me first now get back to Kallu without digressing. So the story goes forward. One day, everyone in the family, was having an innocent conversation on who is going to marry whom. And then, just a playful conversation in a family. So they all forced Kallu to give an answer that whom would he like to marry. So what Kallu did was, in his innocence, he lowered his eyes and he just whispered Salima B, the daughter of Mumani, one of the women in the family. And look at, these lines, how, this created a ruckus in the house. Let's read these lines. Whom are you going to marry, Kallu? Amma asked in just one day. Kallu revealed his yellow teeth in a shy grin. When he was pressed for an answer, he lowered his eyes and whispered, Salima B. May you rot in hell, you stupid fool, a curse on your face. Peeved by the laughter around her, Mumani proceeded to box Kallu's ears. So boxing the ears is a reference to beating Kallu by hitting on his ears. So an innocent answer spoken by a 7-year-old innocent boy led to his beating at the hands of Mumani. Mumani is the mother of this young girl, Salima, who is almost of the age of Kallu. Then some days later, he innocently asked Salima if she would like to marry him. And look at the conversation and the reaction that this brought. Then one day, while he and Salima were playing, Kallu asked her, Salima B, will you marry me? Yes, yes. Salima nodded vigorously, her little head bobbing up and down. Mumani, sitting in the sunny part of the courtyard, combing her hair, was privy to this exchange between Kallu and her daughter. Livid with anger, she removed her sandal and smacked him. It landed in the wrong place and his nose started to bleed, and soon blood was streaming down the side of his face. Kallu's mother, who was visiting there at that time, she saw the blood and screamed that her son had been murdered. Get out of my house, you hypocrite, Mumani yelled and ordered both mother and son out. Kallu's mother wept and begged forgiveness, but her pleas went unheard. So both the mother and the son were kicked out of the house by this innocent and playful conversation by Kallu, who had no idea of how this would affect him. This is the first half of the story. So we are halfway through the first part. We have completed half the story. As I mentioned, this will be a 2-part lecture in which I will discuss the other half in part 2 of this lecture. So this is the first half of the lecture, first half of the story. So basically, all the readers might have noticed that it's a deceptively simple story, because Chughtai doesn't let that tragic feel reach the readers, right? And it also shows how this young boy has been constantly discriminated and he is exploited day and night, and he is not even given his rightful due. Obviously, it's a tragic thing for someone of the age of Kallu. He's just a 7-year-old kid, and despite this playful conversation, he has been beaten so vigorously and so violently, and he and both his mother, they have been kicked out of the house, right? So this is the first half of the story, right? With this, I end this 2-part lecture, and I will see you in the other part shortly, where I'll be discussing the remaining half of the story. So don't forget to watch both the parts if you wish to fully understand the story. I'll be covering the remainder part of the story, and we'll also discuss some critical themes in the story in the next lecture on Kallu. Please share and comment your views on the story, and do share it amongst your friends. It was great to have you here with me. I will see you very shortly in part 2 of this lecture. Thank you and goodbye.